After a week away with Fight Night picks, as always, one half your host duo, Craig Allen, Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, respective socials, Matt Allen FNP. And in the marquee, the first non-title flyweight fight since 2017 when Sergio Pettis fought Brandon Moreno. We have Don't Blink Kai Kara-France, and he's going to be matching up with the Prince, Amir Albazi. And I mean, if you look at this fight, both guys, tons of success in the UFC. Kai Kara-France, if we get down to dirty, he's coming off a flyweight interim championship fight in his rematch with Brandon Moreno. Looked really good in the first round, really good in the second round. One judge had it 2018 for Kara-France. One judge had it 2018 Moreno. The other one was split. It was too hot. It was too cold. It was just right. I'll tell you what was just right. That kick to the body from Brandon Moreno in the third round. So ultimately, Kai Kara-France, he was due a fight earlier on this year. That one did not materialize against Alex Perez. So where he was training for a wrestler in that matchup, now he gets a great grappler in Amir Albazi. And we do say this is a clash of styles. Albazi, I mean, he started at London Shoot Fighters, then he goes over to Extreme Couture. You get to see his full breadth of boxing his last time
he's
out.
not a zero on the feet.
Though he was ranked 8th against the UFC debuting Alessandro Costa in that matchup, dropped him in the second round, dropped him in the third round with different shots in those two. They vary. But Amir Albazi, a great jab. That shovel right that he has is really something to watch out for. You got to watch for the uppercuts from the Prince. But when it does come down to his ground game, I know he was a world champ when it came to his jiu-jitsu at the blue belt category. He was a Swedish champ multiple times over. Amir Albazi is one of those guys you have to look out for. And finally, he gets a really stiff test in a guy like Kai Kara-France.
It's the big step up in competition that he does need. Not just the step up rankings-wise. Kai Kara-France is a pretty big name in the division, right? Like, he's a guy who's been there, done that, fought Brandon Moreno twice, fought Cody Garbrandt in a huge fight on a pay-per-view. Like, Kai represents a big name in the division that Amir Albazi just really desperately needs. Because if he is able to get over Kai, not necessarily the fact that he absorbs all of his fans or the Garbrandt win, but it's going to give him a lot more notoriety than he has ever had before. Because for Albazi, the skills have been there, and he's definitely been able to grow in the striking. The wrestling was so outrageously dominant for a stretch. Like, Amir Albazi's strength is probably his X factor. When he gets a hold of guys, when he gets the hands clasped around them, there's not really any getting out of that one position. Now, I will be interested to see how the movement of Kara-France does stifle some of those entries, because Kai's a guy who is comfortable with moving on the outside, can throw with power off the back foot, but when he's moving forward, there's not a lot of guys in the flyweight division who can deal with it. I'm glad you bring up the Moreno fights because they're weird. Kai wins a lot of the minutes in those fights. Doesn't win the big moments, but he wins a lot of minutes. Even go back and watch their first fight. He's using the boxing very well. He's landing steady shots on Moreno, but Moreno would land a big hook. He'd land a big head kick that would kind of revert a lot of that volume back into Moreno's favor. So for Kai, he's been able to get to the top of the division, but never quite break through. So this is still a really important fight for him too, because if he loses to Albazi, not that to us, not that to anyone who really knows how good Albazi is, that's that big of a loss, but for Kai, he's had that many bites at the top of the division. If he loses this, he might almost get reverted down to like a Derek Brunson position, to where it's like, okay, you're still a great fighter, but you're really just subjected to fighting a lot of these prospects on their way up. And I do think Kai Kara-France is a guy who, if he is able to win another 2 or 3 fights, I'm not saying he's going to fight a third time against Moreno. That's hard to do with him losing the first 2. But could he have a competitive fight with a Pantoja? Could he go out there with a Manel Kopp and have a good fight? Like, I think those are all fights that a lot of fans want to see if he is able to get past Amir Albazi.
And for Kai Kara-France, it's interesting because, again, we talk about knockdown differential. He's been in the UFC for a time. I mean, he's 7-3 so far, but 6-4 is the knockdown ratio.
His fights are wild.
Even in his UFC debut, it's on that big fight card. It's JDS taking on Tai Tuivasa. He's taking on Elias Garcia, grappler. And in that one, Garcia lands an overhand left that drops Kai Kara-France. He's back up to his feet. It was an interesting one because I talked about Muin Gafurov, who's also on this card. He threatens with a heel hook to get back up. But Kara-France is one of those guys. He can threaten with a heel hook. He can threaten with a couple of different things, or at least he'll grab your ankle. And
he's more active than you would assume a primary grappler would be.
He tries to pop his way back up. A primary striker, I think you meant.
Primary striker.
When you look at a guy like Kai Kara-France, he too excels in a lot of the scrambles. Now, is that the best place to get into against a guy like Amir Albazi, whose lone loss comes to Shorty Torres? Probably not. And the sad thing, I guess, for Amir Albazi is since he debuted in 2020 against Malcolm Gordon, that was both of their debuts, he's only had the 4 fights total. So he beats Gordon, he beats Jaga Shumagulov, he beats Francisco Figueiredo, first round submission, and he beats Alessandro Costa his last time out.
Such a big step up.
And when you do look at it for Albazi, again, the grappling is a big thing because once he takes you down, he's not necessarily like a guy like a Khabib Nurmagomedov. If you get up, it's chaining the takedown back. Most guys don't get back up. Like, he holds you down. He's able to keep position. His top pressure is really good. And if it gets back standing, he's not a squared up grappler when it does come to his strikes. He does have a really good leg kick. He will mix in his boxing. He's got a nice left hook to the body. Does Albazi, but he will pump that jab out there once, twice to keep you thinking. It's obviously the movement on the outside of a guy like Kai Kara-France where he can pepper you, and he can do it for 3 rounds. I'm sure he can do it for 5. I'll be interested to see if Albazi can do a little bit of the same in a fight like this. And again, Kai Kara-France, he came into the Ultimate Fighter Season 24 like Tim Elliott. Tim Elliott was the number 1 overall pick. Kai Kara-France, 8th overall pick.
Pretty good value on that
8th round pick, I guess, by Henry Cejudo on that one. Henry Cejudo and Joseph Benavidez, the coaches, they got cucked because the winner got to fight the actual champ, and those two were title challengers.
Oh, no, that's the term
Former
I use.
title challengers. So that was a weird season there.
I have a really hard time with this fight because I think if it was 3 rounds, I'd say Amir Albazi without a doubt in my mind. Maybe not without a doubt in my mind, but you get the idea. If he's able to control 2 of the rounds with his wrestling, it's pretty difficult for Kai to just make up the difference in that 3rd round. But the movement and the just... He's good at getting back up to his feet, guys. Like, Kai Kara-France isn't a black belt. He's not a Division 1 wrestler. He is very much a kickboxer. But he is squirrely on the mat. And there might be a world where I think, okay, he can scramble a little bit, get back up to his feet, and land power shots. There's another world where Amir Albazi gets that first takedown and holds him down, and we just never really see Kai get his striking going in the first place.
And we have seen guys have success against Kai Kara-France with their grappling. Brandon Royval, the spinning elbow into the illegal knee. Rogerio Bontorin, and you did see Kara-France get dropped in the 2nd round against Brandon Royval. That was a 2-round fight of the night. They're rare, but at flyweight, they happen. Matt, again, we have a look at your poll over there in the YouTube community tab. We threw it out there to you. 62% of you have Kai Kara-France to get the win in the matchup. So ultimately, the hesitance, and I'm really tricky on this one, kind of going back and watching the tape study, I found myself not looking at the bad things and only looking at the good things. But when you're trying to make a pick on this one, who do you got?
I'm going to ever so slightly say Amir Albazi. I think his ability to threaten with the submission will be enough to where I don't worry about him having to go out there and win every single round, because that's initially what I had said. If this was a 3-round fight, again, Albazi's wrestling should be good enough to control 7.5 minutes, right? In a 15-minute fight, that's all you really have to do to be able to win it. But in 25 minutes, if Kai is able to spring back up to his feet, win, the later half of the fight, because he does have great volume, and we've seen it in 3-round fights. His volume doesn't drop from round 1 to round 3. He is a guy who will stay competitive, will gain as the fight goes on, and he is a guy who, when he senses his opponent start to slow down, that's when he really puts his foot on the gas and picks up the pressure. So again, I feel like I'm painting a picture for Kai Kara-France, but I do think the wrestling of Albazi is going to be able to stifle the timing enough to where Kai Kara-France won't get comfortable with his bigger power strikes to begin with.
There's going to be a lot of people that are going to whine in the comments this week. Give me Kai Kara-France in the matchup. And the reason why I like him is he circles away. You watch the guys that are fighting Amir Albazi. What do? They fight in a straight line. You look at what Costa was doing. You look at what Shumagulov was doing. Gordon struggled on the mat. And you also had that win over Francisco Figueiredo, who fights like an old-timey boxer, but his takedown defense just can't cash those checks. Albazi was able to get it done on the mat. I like the speed out of a guy like Kai Kara-France. If you can show that against Moreno before he ends up getting kicked to the gut, that really does something for me. But then Kara-France, 2 camps in a row. Perez, the wrestler, and Amir Albazi. I think that's going to play out for Kai Kara-France. So split on the pick in the matchup. I'm going with Don't Blink, Kai Kara-France to get the win. Matt going with the Prince, Amir Albazi to get it done. It has been an interesting year with Fight Night picks. A couple of weeks between these cards. We had the video out there, if you haven't checked it out, about some of the most skilled fighters that we've seen in the UFC, but those results, they were the worst, so make sure you check that one out here on the channel. If you want to throw out some ideas for that series called Parry and Counter, please do. We have a show called Question Mark Kicks 2 hours before the prelims. If anything changed throughout the week, if anything big happened on weigh-in day on Friday, we get the opportunity to break it down and dissect it 2 hours before the prelims on Saturday. So make sure you check out that show. Toss a like on your way out if you haven't already. Keep up the good work down there in the comments section. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. As we always say, let's get into it.